Father's Day. There goes the peacock. I'm trying out my GH5 Lumix in case any of you are curious, and it's got a almost fisheye lens. It's a very wide angle. It's the widest angle you can get, I think, for the Panasonic. And I'm set it wide so you can see. I might look a little rounded in the face, but anyway, I am so happy to be a father. It amazes me that I was able to find somebody willing to allow me to do that, to get into that position. Yeah, I had a little spot on the lens. Two somebodies actually. So I have 3 children. My oldest is Jasmer, and he's 33. And he has a son also named Jasmer, who's going to be 5 next weekend. My blue-eyed grandson, and a real joy. And then there's Allison, Jasmer's younger sister. I think she's 32. And then Andriana with my second wife, Marilyn. Oh, Cindy is the mother of Jasmer and Allison. And Andriana has a daughter, Alana. And she's a little joy. I don't see her as much because they live up in Oregon and are a little bit... I can drive down to Jasmer's house and come back in the same day, but it's a trip. You know, I have to spend a few days if I go up to Oregon, so I know I should be a better grandfather, a better dad, and make that trip more often, but I just don't. And maybe that's some advice I could give to you younger fathers. Spend as much time with your kids and your grandkids as you can. I didn't. And we're not close. I haven't received a Father's Day text or card. And it makes me sad. But it also makes me reflect on my life and the things that I could have done differently. So my suggestion to you is, if you're a young father, is do those things for your children that will leave you in such a position as a grandfather to where all your kids and grandkids want to come and see you and send you Father's Day cards and silly gifts and all those sorts of things. I'm not complaining, though. I'm just giving advice because that's what I do in my videos. My dad, Robert Charles Tillitz Sr., was a very humble man. Great and humble and hardworking and God-fearing, and from Ohio he carried those Midwest values throughout his life. Attended church regularly. Took me to church as often as he could, even though him and my mother went separate ways when I was 5 or 6. But he was a wonderful and kind and caring man. And I miss him. I had another father, a second father, a stepfather. He was my first stepfather. His name was Jim Lyman, and he moved us when I was, I think, 6 or 7. I was in 3rd grade. I was just starting 3rd grade. He moved us from Oakland, from the urban jungles of Oakland, to the country, wild, very rural Pescadero. Pescadero itself was rural back then. I think it had a population of 200. And we moved up into Native Sons Park. We were, I think I measured it off recently, and it was 1.3 miles from the school bus stop up the road to where we lived. And that old saying that we had to, that some dads will tell their kids, I had to walk miles uphill to school both ways, or something like that. I might have butchered it, but I did have to, because the road, I had to walk uphill both ways because the road came down to the creek and then it went back up to the creek road where we caught the bus. My stepfather's son Chris lived with us, and he was my younger brother, and an inspiration in many ways. He and I were not exactly alike, though we grew together and shared many things in common. He was more internal. He was a thinker, and he was just smarter than me. And as it's turned out, as we grow older now, he's 2 years younger than me, approximately. He's more artistic. I think he always was, and it finally came out in the form of music. He's a very good guitar player and lives in Eureka and plays music with bands. And if he has a style, I can't tell you because I don't listen to him, but I think he's not like a straight rock and roller. He's maybe a bluesy rock and roller, songs that I've listened to. And I think a lot depends on the band he happens to be with. But I believe he could probably play anything at this point. So Jim Lyman was an exact opposite of my real father, if you will. We always use that term. Jim, where my father was a teetotaler and a churchgoer, Jim was a wild and crazy partier. But he was deeply intellectual, as his son Chris was. And instead of a TV, he bought us encyclopedias. And with those encyclopedias, there was 2 auxiliary sets, the books of science and the books of knowledge. And that is what probably shaped me more than anything in life, is those books, those encyclopedias. I had questions. I've always had questions. I've always wanted to know, and I would ask him something about the world, and he would say, go look it up. You'll find it under A or B or C in the encyclopedia, or check the Book of Sciences and look under this topic, and I think you'll find it. So he taught me how to look things up, and that has carried over in so many ways. It made me a reader. When I was going to Pescadero Elementary, I wasn't a very good student. I liked to cut up, and I know that I was the king of the spelling times in Mr. Felix's class. I always had it up into the 150s, anywhere from 100 to 200. And I'd work on those. That's all I did. I didn't do homework. I did spelling times. So I learned how to spell words. I still struggle with it, but I think I spell better than the average person, and maybe have a better grasp in the English language, even though I don't use the big words when I talk or even when I write. Sometimes I throw one in, but I know those words. I know what they mean. I can look at any word just about and know its meaning, even though it's not in my everyday vocabulary. So Jim Lyman did that for me. He taught me how to think. He taught me how to read, and he was a writer. He was working on a novel, and every Sunday he would turn on classical symphony music, turn it up loud, and go to his typewriter, and the whole house would resonate with symphony music. And I appreciate symphony music. I've never pursued it. I know a few of the famous ones, the Nutcracker Suite and Brahms' Lullaby. I can when they play, I certainly recognize and can not hum along, but follow the story of the music. They all have a story. So Jim was from San Francisco, more of a bohemian type of father. As I say, much different than my Midwest conservative father. And he and my mother eventually went different ways, and my mom, to make ends meet, was driving from Pescadero up to Half Moon Bay, to the Half Moon Bay Inn, and working as a cocktail waitress. And she did well enough to keep us fed. We always had hillbilly bread and chocolate milk. And she cooked, fried us chicken, and made us tacos. She made her taco meat with vinegar in it, a touch of vinegar. I don't know if anybody has experienced that, where she got that. And she always used lots of mayonnaise, which I understand came from my grandmother, my mom's mom, Mabel, who's from Nova Scotia. But anyway, as she was working in the Half Moon Bay Inn, she met a guy a plumber that bartended there a few nights a week, and was a wonderful, happy-go-lucky, hard-working man. His name is Jack Tomberlin. And her and Jack hit it off, and they fell in love. And Jack came to our house in Pescadero. By this time, we had moved yet further up the road. I think we were 2.5 miles up. We were living in this. There was a log house that nobody had lived in for 20-some years, and we chased all the rats out. Never got rid of the bats because there was a crack about that wide down the peak of the roof, which was over the living room, where we had a beautiful bay window. Just a large window looking out at the valley, and it was a long ways to walk. And I eventually got a Suzuki 80 motorcycle, and was finally able to get up and down that road without walking, and I was able to run all over on that and get jobs. And I worked for Ed Taft at Lemon Hill Ranch, and there was a couple other jobs up Lemon Hill Road that I got because I was working at the ranch, cleaning yards and shoveling out horse stalls and baling hay and those sorts of things. So I had to work because my parents didn't give me money, and I thank them for that. I thank them for, I thank Jim for, let me start from the beginning. I thank my dad for his humbleness and his kindness and his reverence for the Lord, and instilling that value in me, and those Midwest values, that conservatism that we hear so much about, but not everybody really understands. And I thank Jim Lyman for his intellectualness that he tried to pass on, and did, I think, successfully to a degree. He certainly taught me how to read, and I'm lousy with numbers, but I'm pretty good for a guy that never did homework at writing, and reading and writing the written word is my forte. And then Jack, when he came along, he was a good provider, a good man, a good father, a kind man. He didn't try to tell me how to run my life. He was just there for me. He moved us from the boonies in Pescadero up to Montera, to a house with an ocean view. If it was clear, we could see the Farallones. It's right at the foot at 7th Street, across the street from Jim Jogas, and Sheila Lacey just was across the street, but just up a little bit. And we could see not Pop and Peggy's, but Kent's grocery store. Post office was just several hundred yards away. And that was a big move. That was a big change. It was, it was like moving to the big city, even though many would consider Montera rural back in, what would it be, about 67, I think we moved there. 68, right in there somewhere. So Jack provided for us well. I didn't know what it was like to have a dad that that bought a new car every year, and we had a new color TV. I finally learned what TV was. We had it in Pescadero, but sometimes we have to turn the antenna to get fuzzy black and white signals from channels 2, 4, 5, and 7. But we had a color TV and a big one for the time, and was able to watch football and baseball. My dad, my real father, used to come to Pescadero and pick me up during the summers and take me to Giants games, and so I was a Giants fan early on, and a 49ers fan. There was no A's and no Raiders back then. The Giants and the Niners were the only game in town, so that's why I'm a Giants and Niners fan. But I appreciate the Raiders and A's. Anyway, so Jack then, kind of got us out of the sticks to Montera. That was just a notch above the sticks at that time. It was still rural. We used to go back in the canyons. And Jack was from Montera. He lived back in what is referred to then as Loader's Canyon, but check my focus. And he, so he grew up kind of a country boy, and I guess he knew how nice it is to get a boy out of the country and get him out into a larger, more diverse environment. So I enrolled in Half Moon Bay High School, and I still remember the day I asked, what was her name? She had two daughters. I'm blank for some reason, but I asked her as she was enrolling me. I was looking out the windows at all the kids outside, and because I came from Pescadero High School that was like 90 or 100 students, and that included La Honda and San Gregorio and people in between, down to Cascade Ranch, and where Glenn Wyatt came from, White House Canyon, and all that area. So I asked how many kids were in the school, and she says 526. And I said, 526? Ah! How am I ever going to deal with this? I cannot deal with this. This is going to be too much. 526 kids that I didn't know. Well, as it turned out, I knew a couple. I knew Buddy Quadros and his cousin Andre, and I knew Mike Glass. Mike Glass and I are probably the only guys, at least we were then. We had one thing in common. We went to Pescadero High School together as freshmen, and then at the beginning of our sophomore years, we both transferred to Half Moon Bay High School. So Mike Glass was and he's, if you know Mike, he's a solid, stable guy, and it was good to have him to cling to while I was trying to get acclimated. But I started meeting people from Montera, and so I got to know the Joneses and the Van Olens and the Larsons. Rick, if you happen to be watching this, Charlie Friel, Darrell Jones, Lonnie Ellis, Brad Morris. Then of course Sheila Lacey was across the street, and her Jenny Kennedy was her best friend, or Jenny Kennedy was also there. I don't remember Jenny's last name now, but so between Montera and then sort of Moss Beach, I made friends there. Jim Emery and I got to be good friends. Oh, Frank Riddell and I were friends. And to wrap this up, because I know I'm going long, I don't see the time meter on my screen. I got the wrong screen on, but it doesn't matter. I know I'm going long. I know this is way too long. Jack got us out of Pescadero and brought me up to Half Moon Bay, where I eventually met a lot of people. And, it was the summer of love, and hippies were, and drugs and etc. were abundant. There was two cultures, a new one developing, the hippie culture and the drug culture, and then the old, we called it Hoosiers, not knowing what it meant. I know now that it's a college back east, and I don't remember off the top of my head which one it is, but we called it ourselves Hoosiers. Rednecks, we were the ones that didn't have long hair, and drank beer, Ole beer, or whatever was on sale. But I remember drinking a lot of Ole, and maybe some PBR now and then. So we partied. I eventually was not satisfied with one identity. So I let my hair grow a little bit, and I started going to the stoner parties, smoking dope and whatnot. There was still fighting. It was a big thing to go down to the Half Moon Bay Inn or Princeton Inn, especially on St. Shamarita. That was like fight-arita. Everybody fought, and I stayed into that groove for a time, but until I got into fishing, and I'm trying to sum this up. I discovered Princeton, I discovered the docks, and I had met Larry Furtado. He, though older, hung out at us kids' parties, teenagers' parties, and I had met him, and he started a business. He was a garbage man, but he bought a house or rented, I don't know. He had a place in Princeton, and he built a trailer, and he started hauling boats out. And I went to work with him, helping him do that, and eventually went salmon fishing with him. He got a salmon boat, and I went salmon fishing with him. I think we went out 3 times in that first 3 months of the season and caught, a dozen fish total. And then he fired me because he went to sleep. He pointed the boat at the radar station. We were straight off of Pillar Point, and he pointed at the radar station. We were outside the deep reef, and he said, "Just keep running the lines up and down, and when that looks a lot closer, wake me up." So we're trolling along, running the lines up and down, and taking hake off, and trying to put fresh bait on, and do it like he taught me. Like I say, this was probably my 3rd day on the ocean, and our days weren't long. The 2 previous days, we never went like put the gear in at daylight and fish till dark. So we ran across the deep reef, and all of a sudden I was watching the springs for the pump jobs that Salmon given. All of a sudden they're going spring, and then the lines, the leaded lines that were normally down in the water, they floated up to the top, and they had all these different colored rock cods on them. I went in and woke Larry up and said, "I don't know what's going on. You got to come out here." So he came out, and he said, "Well, we ran over the rocks. That's what's the matter." And so we got the mess all straightened out, and we got in, and he says to me as I'm getting off the boat, he says, "I'm going to have to let you go." And I said, "Why? For what?" And he says, I can't afford you. We lost 4 leads today. Those things cost 25 cents a pound. Can't afford you." Even though I had no idea what the deep reef was, what went on, what happened. I was just following orders. But anyway, so I went to work on another boat, Joe on the Italia up in Bodega, and I think we went out 2 times in the last 3 months of the season, and I made about $40. I think I figured out I made $40 for Larry the first 3 months and $40 for Joe the second 3 months. Thank God I had a wetsuit and knew how to dive for abalone, because that's what kept me eating. But I was diligent. I hung out on those boats, and that diligence paid off. And the next year I got a job with Lynn Martin, and then I got a job with Lenny Montalbano on the Michelle Ann, who most people don't know, maybe some watching this do. And that was a big step up. Lenny was a highliner and a go-getter and a hard worker, and he was a relentless boss and taskmaster, and I really learned a lot from him. Not only about fishing, but the discipline of you stick and stay and you make it pay. Perhaps he was another father, at least a father figure of sort. And there came a time after, I think it was 4 years with Lenny, that I got an opportunity to lease a boat. and get my first boat. I was leasing it, took over a lease. Another guy was able to get on a bigger boat, and I got the Cindy Linda. And I caught fish with that, and I ran up and down the coast, and I became a captain on that boat. And meantime, back to Father's Day, Jack was watching all this, and Gino's boat came up for sale because he was building the Ms. Law. And my father, Jack, knew Gino well. He lived right next door to Frank Tomberlin, would be my step-uncle, and Louise. Dennis Tomberlin's mom and dad. Tommy Tomberlin's mom and dad. So Jack saw what was going on and heard that Gino's boat was for sale and that Gino wanted to sell it to me because he wanted to see it stay in Half Moon Bay, and I had become part of the gang, part of the Z Squad. And Jack, I had several $100s in the bank and a Visa credit card that had a $500 limit and a old pickup truck that ran and was was current on its license, and I was current on my fishing and driver's license. So Jack, production credit was around then, and Jack put up the house as collateral and co-signed so I could borrow $65,000 from production credit to buy the Visit. He put his major investment on the line for me. So, happy Father's Day, Jackson. Action Jackson. And Jim Lyman. And Robert Tillitz Sr. You've all made me what I am. And you're all gone now. But you're still here. Lord, I could be sentimental. And happy Father's Day to all of you out there that were patient enough to stick through me with this. Have a great day.